Welcome, and thank you for being here to meet with us, the Cool Cleveland Editorial Board. Today is September 26, 2013, and we are in the beautiful art gallery of the historic Old Stone Church here on Public Square in beautiful downtown Cleveland. Joining us today to discuss issue 82 are Cleveland-Cuyahoga County Port Authority Chief Financial Officer, Brent Leslie, thank you for being here, joined by issue 82 Campaign Co-Chair and Port Board Member, Chris Ronayne, thanks Chris, and Campaign Manager, John Farina. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
We've reserved the first 10 minutes of our 30 minutes to hear from you in support of this issue, and we'll use the remaining 20 minutes of our Q&A with our editorial board. This session is being videotaped. It will be posted to coolcleveland.com to allow our readers a better chance to understand the issues and the candidates as they prepare to vote in the upcoming November 5th general election. We will use this session ourselves to help us prepare our editorials and our endorsements. I'd like to read the ballot language that will be on the ballot for issue 82. It's a county-wide district. It's a proposed tax levy renewal for the Cleveland-Cuyahoga County Port Authority. A majority affirmative vote is necessary for passage. It's a renewal of a tax for the benefit of the Cleveland-Cuyahoga County Port Authority for the purpose of providing funds necessary for the Port Authority budget at a rate not exceeding 0.13 mil for each $1 evaluation, which amounts to 1.3 cents for each $100 evaluation for 5 years commencing in 2013, first due in calendar year 2014. I'm Thomas Mulready, publisher of CoolCleveland.com, and I'm joined by our writers and editors who write regularly and weekly on politics and civic affairs for Cool Cleveland: Mansfield Frazier, Richey Piiparinen, Anastasia, Pantsios, and Larry Durston. So we'd like to invite you to spend about 10 minutes or so telling us and our readers why we should support this levy.
Great. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Cool Cleveland, and thanks to the Old Stone Church for having us. Again, Chris Ronayne, a member of the Port Authority Board, joined by Brent Leslie of the Port staff and John Farina of the Port campaign team. The Cleveland-Cuyahoga County Port Authority is up, as Thomas said, on your ballot in November. We are seeking endorsement of the electorate of Cuyahoga County to renew our levy. You've been paying for this over the last 5 years, and this is a renewal, not a tax increase, as was said. It's an important first thing for us to discuss. The levy does support, obviously, the operating budget of the Cleveland-Cuyahoga County Port Authority. I am a relatively new member to the board, about 2 years onto the board as an appointee of Cuyahoga County. I want to say, as a board member, as an opener, I think one of the issues for our port is it's an incredibly great asset for the city and county in Northeast Ohio. It is also a relatively misunderstood entity. And so thanks for giving us the opportunity to present what it is and to help our voters better understand who we are. First and foremost, I'm going to tell just some personal anecdotes about being on the port board and the business that we see. Last week, our board had 2 items that are vastly different in the spectrum of what the Port Authority is all about, but it helps define the range of activities. We financed a new company location here at the Chagrin Highlands, Nova Company. It is a company that specializes in coatings, particularly for automobile seats and other types of products. What's important perhaps isn't exactly their specialization. What's important is the fact that we financed it. It will be the world headquarters here in Cuyahoga County. And it's a good news story for Cleveland that perhaps didn't get out far enough, but the port behind the scenes as a finance conduit to make a deal like that happen makes jobs. On the jobs front, we represent about 18,000 jobs in Cuyahoga County in terms of the touch points to those jobs. These are good paying jobs for Cuyahoga County residents. These are not chump change kind of jobs. These are important jobs that support more than one person in the family, so the multiplier effect of that 18,000 can go out as far as a living wage and good job will pay. We also, from the standpoint of financing, represent about $1.8 billion in economic activity. So the leverage factor of the numbers that Thomas cited, what is relatively about $3.50 a year for the average Cuyahoga County taxpayer, money's already being paid, leverages a long ways, $1.8 billion in economic activity. If you could pick up 30 cents off the street corner on any given month, put it in a cup for 18,000 jobs and $1.8 billion in annual economic activity, you know you go a long way with 30 cents a month. We get asked in this county, everywhere we go, for money to support important causes. You get asked at the grocery store, you get asked you know, at the pizza shop, you get asked on your ballot. But for 30 cents, or roughly $3.50 a year, you can help leverage with a team of partners in Cuyahoga County 18,000 jobs. That's a jobs piece, and I relate that to an activity that we had last week on the port board. Let me switch gears. Talk a little bit about the port as an environmental steward. Another action that was taken and approved at the port last week, and a news note really, was the activation of a part of the former Dike 14, now Cleveland State Lakefront Nature Preserve, 88 acres just north of Glenville, Rockefeller Park, and the Cultural Gardens. You know this, Thomas, from being out there about a month ago for the great One World Fest. We have 88 acres that is open and publicly accessible on the lakefront. What we brought forth, thanks to the Cleveland Garden Club and the port's work, is a new walking path that takes you out to a plaza that gives you an incredible vista back to the city. It's also an incredible bird migratory area. It's a great nature place. It's a great place to put persons of all generations in touch with nature. But that's the port on the environmental side, creating both a nature preserve, better lakefront access, and to bring it further, and we get news every week with the port about other things we do, but the reality is we are now cleaning up the Cuyahoga River. In the last year, about the last year and a half, we've brought forth 2 boats that clean up the debris on the Cuyahoga River. You don't see the tires, all of the debris that used to float on the Cuyahoga River because it's gone, because the port is cleaning up the Cuyahoga River. We also, while we're on the riverfront for a minute, reuse the dredge material that we used to pack out in dikes and CDFs, as you will, contained disposal facilities that packed out over the Cleveland lakefront. Nowadays, this new port is actively using that material for benign reuse in the community, construction projects and other things. We are and will continue to work on community projects like the restoration, mediation of the problem of the Irishtown Bend slope erosion. If the west side of the river slides in as it could, we would lose basically our access to our steel mills, and we would have a real problem. Houston here in Cleveland, we would undergo a significant problem. So the port is working on the geotechnical analysis of what needs to be done to fix that slope. I've just given you a broad spectrum of what this new port is about. I didn't even mention the fact that the port selflessly took itself off of all of the docks it once took on behind Cleveland Brown Stadium and the Science Center, and we really downsized, slim-sized down to what we need, making way for several acres of new development on the Cleveland harborfront. That was a big news story. I worked as former planning director to try to help make that happen, but this port got that done with the mayor and the Cleveland City Council, and they opened up docks 28B, docks 30 and docks 32. Those numbers may not mean anything to you, but they're basically the near 20 acres that is behind Cleveland Brown Stadium, where we held Ingenuity Fest this last week, opening up public access. So a more accessible lakefront, a cleaner Cuyahoga River, more points to enjoy the lake because the port is taking only that space which it needs, and then flipping to the very important job development, job generation, and economic activity. All for about $3.50 a year, about 30 cents a month. That's the yield on this Cleveland-Cuyahoga County Port Authority levy. It's a renewal, it's not a tax increase, and in the end, this is money you've been spending to keep your city competitive. We hope you'll consider keeping it competitive in the far distant future by helping us support this levy. I gave you a little bit about what we do in the spectrum because I think it's largely understood the portfolio of things we do. Yield to my colleagues and any questions you have, but that's our opening. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
So you mentioned being a financial conduit, environmental stewardship, placemaking, real estate development. What about being a port?
Actually, well said on the way back. But on being a port, let me ask Brent to speak a little bit about the actual port activity in the waterborne commerce.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly the core of our business. I mean, that is what we're here to do. The majority of those 18,000 jobs, those are all port-related jobs. That's not taking credit for financing Nova Solutions or Eaton's corporate headquarters or the Flat Seas Bank. None of that are in those job numbers. So when Chris talks about jobs, those are really relating to the core maritime business, which includes supporting ArcelorMittal, that steel coming in internationally. And a lot of the companies that rely or that utilize that steel, or why Arcelor is here, it's here because Cleveland gives them a competitive advantage. And that's where the port comes in, which is to provide, efficient facilities, safe handling of cargo, and making sure that the river's dredged, that the bulkheading is kept up to speed. So, I guess I'd say, we're still very positive about the future of the maritime business long term here in Cleveland, and it does support a lot of companies here in the region.
So, the reason why I asked this, so there was the past port director. His focus seemed to be everywhere except on what the essence of the port is. And there was a lot of time and money wasted, especially with the relocation of the port. And so I think there was an editorial in the PD where I think you probably against issue 82. And they leveled some criticisms. It was 25% capacity in the past decade, and the port's operating at about maybe $2 million a year operating losses for the past 10 years. So can you talk a little bit about those criticisms, and especially for citizens, their taxpayer money?
Sure. The capacity issue is true, and so we can only speak to where we are today, which is we looked at the capacity, we looked at future demand. We tried to base it in some market realities and said we could reduce our footprint, provide more access to the lakefront. Ironically, if you look at the share of everything that's come into the Great Lakes, our market share has actually grown. So it's not, the St. Lawrence Seaway wasn't built to its proper specifications. It was sort of built to fail almost. It wasn't built big enough. There was a lot of concern out of the New York, New Jersey Port Authority that it was going to start taking business away from the East Coast. And there's really a lot of federal policy issues that hurt the Great Lakes. And I think you see that here. You see it in Burns Harbor, Chicago, in other places. So, we feel like we're positioned to grow. And we're now focused on driving that business. When you do talk about, expanding to 300 acres or, very large long-term plans, it does sort of take away focus from sort of near-term opportunities that can benefit the region. And I think that's where we're at today, is trying to get that capacity up through wind energy, we put additional rail on the port that's attracted some business. So we're doing what we can. This is all part of global trade and how commodities move and federal policy. We're trying to do what we can to grow that business.
Just for Cleveland has declined in a large part, not just because of manufacturing, but because it's been disconnected from global capital and global ideas. And I think the port gives Cleveland a huge competitive advantage to start recapping into this global connectivity. And so my worry then just goes back, can the port know who it is intrinsically and grow its competitive advantage and not, get so sidetracked by some of the great things you can do, but for a port to be a good port, it's got to be a good port.
Well, and I think at the core, we've got a 5-year strategic plan that we're following. It is new to, a lot of the wearing the jacket of the yesteryear. We've tried to shed that jacket. It's a new port, it's a new staff, it's a new team led by Will Friedman. And the 5-year plan is, and you rightly hit it, Richey, it's the core business of the port, but it's also about being good environmental stewards and placemakers. And I think some of the criticism of the port of the past is we weren't the latter, and so we've got to respond to the modern city that we are to be a good partner, and I think this is the new port. Relative to the business operations of the port, if we are going to still be a town with industry, and we just had the president of ArcelorMittal here in town last week speaking about how this is one of the most efficient steel production centers in the world, and we pride that. We are a diverse economy in a new economy, everything from IT to heavy manufacturing and everything in between. So the port is critical in terms of supporting the traditional Cleveland industrial economy that we still have. But we are of a new mindset to not take up more than we need, and I think that's been one of the sticking points about this port. Relative to, you kind of hit it on the whole issue of commerce and infrastructure. How can we be a competitive 21st century waterfront city that was founded for strategic purpose and strategic trade without having a competitive 21st century port? So we're building toward that, and we are in a bit of an R&D phase on certain issues, liner services. We're still bullishly looking at cross-lakefront trade opportunities, not sort of bashfully looking at it, we're bullishly looking at it. It's got to work by the numbers, but I think these are things that innovative Clevelanders are going to want to see of their port. They're not going to want to just see the port that simply does one thing the old way, but this is a port with a variety of interests to help move the Cleveland economy forward.
And as you talk about that capacity, you're still talking about 13 million tons of cargo that moves through the Port of Cleveland. If you're talking about that, if you're saying that's low capacity, imagine where it goes when we grow from there. I mean, that's, and from an environmental perspective, if we didn't have the port to bring that in, that would have to come in on trucks. That's 400,000 semi-trucks to bring in stuff. I mean, we would never be able to handle that. So
how would that compare? How do it compare to cities on the lake of similar size? Where are we in terms of our?
We're about third or fourth on the lakes in terms of total tonnage. But tonnage can be misleading because Toledo would have a lot more tonnage than Cleveland, but that's primarily handling grain, which we don't handle, grain and coal and other commodities, which we don't handle here in Cleveland. The steel, the finished steel that comes in from Rotterdam, we get about 400,000 tons of that, and it's very high value. That's the product that comes in, even though it's low tonnage. It goes to Lincoln Electric, it goes to a steel processor, and it ends up you know, in an appliance or in a part of the car. And so, you know, tonnage, we're about 50th nationally of all the ports in the United States.
Well, go ahead, I'm sorry.
So, I mean, I understand the capacity issue, and you're really kind of turning the page, and there's a lot of infrastructure that you have to kind of retool to be a new organization. What about some of the concerns as far as kind of becoming, there's, I think that the column I referenced, the editorial, they use the quote, you become a political slush fund. What do you think about that as far as becoming, say, de facto real estate developers and using money?
Thanks for the one thing I just.
Let me ask you, just let me introduce Harriet Applegate, Executive Secretary of the North Shore AFL-CIO Federation of Labor, who is also here in support of the issue. Not to interrupt.
And I've read, you know, there's been a lot of criticism or confusion about the port and the role of financing. Mm-hmm. In almost every state and region, there is something like a port authority. Some states are called finance authority or a resource authority, and they are designed to provide finance options to businesses. In Ohio, just the statute happened to give that authority to ports, so it's a blessing. Because one way that we've been able to keep our millage at 0.13 mils since 1968 is through having this other business and not become wholly reliant on the maritime business to fund our operations. So we became entrepreneurial, came up with this financing business. It's not public money. This is money that is bought by a private investor, pension funds, you know, Fidelity, people that purchase municipal bonds.
It's not public money, but it's backed by the guarantee of the taxpayers' money, correct?
Absolutely not. In big bold letters, in every issue, every bond issue that we ever do, in big bold letters, it says these are not obligations of the Cleveland-Cuyahoga County Port Authority. We don't pledge any of our revenue or any of our assets in support of a private third party. There's actually constitutional limitations.
And who does pay if the bonds fail, if they're not paid back? Who's responsible? Is it the state of Ohio?
That's a risk. That risk is shifted to the investor. And so, you know, if you follow sort of what's been going on in Detroit, they defaulted on some municipal bond, which is rare. I mean, defaults do happen. What the port does is more economic development bonds, which, you know, do carry a little bit more risk, but they don't risk the assets of the port. And so, you know, we've done over about $2 billion in principal. We've had one default, really. I mean, we're really proud of our default rates, that we're not doing bad deals. The beauty of what we do is, you know, every now and then if we do get a call from somebody that wants to do a project, you know, the market decides whether it's done or not. Nobody can come to us and say, I want my project done because I'm politically connected. It doesn't work that way. These bond investors are very sophisticated. They only invest in solid credits.
But part of the issue is that there's a lack of accountability because of the way the board is structured, because of the way that the board itself is assigned by the county and the city. They each have people that they place on the board, but there's no direct accountability to the taxpayers. So that seems to be an issue in terms of accountability. And I'm just wondering, a lot of people are wondering, why aren't these financing issues handled by the city or the county? I mean, or the state in some cases. I mean, it's not only confusing, but it seems like why, almost redundant, why do we have it here? What's the benefit? Obviously you say it helps support some of the port operations, that's great, but why is it this sort of non-accountable, not quasi-governmental, it's a governmental institution, it is. Why is it even in place in the first place?
I think there's two things. One is the ultimate goal of doing these financings is to promote economic development. So whether it's the Flatsies Bank or Omnova Solutions, when Omnova is out globally searching for a headquarters and they want a certain type of bond financing, that's available in North Carolina. That's available in all the other locations that they looked at. So once again, to be competitive, just like we need to be competitive on the maritime side, this region needs to have somebody that does those sorts of projects, and then it becomes who's best positioned to facilitate that interaction with private industry, and that's what ports really across the United States are built for. We have to straddle the line between a public port authority doing things on behalf of the public, but also we're dealing with private industry every day, and so we feel like the port's best positioned to do that.
I just want to open up to Harriet. I don't know if you have any questions. I welcome you here. Thank you.
Well, I just wanted to, this is from my world. I'm on the board of an organization called Emerald Cities, and Emerald Cities is a project of the National Building Trades, and the building trades are involved in development all over the country. They put money into development. Roos Brothers often gets money from the National Building Trades. There's a Housing Investment Trust and a Building Investment Trust. And when you think about the work of the building trades, they can build big box malls and more Walmarts and more strip malls. But one of the other things they can do is look at the existing buildings we have and weatherize them, bring advanced energy to them. And so Emerald Cities is sort of like a forward-looking. Why we don't want our people just building more and more Walmarts all over the country until we're coast-to-coast Walmarts, big boxes, strip malls, that sort of thing, unnecessary development. But let's look at the buildings we do have, make them energy efficient, give people, in the inner cities jobs. Let's look at what we've got. And so Emerald Cities is just that sort of forward-looking, what are the building trades going to do in the future kind of project. They could not get funding or bond authority from the city or the county, but the Port Authority actually is allowing a situation where the cities of this county can it'll essentially be free, weatherize their existing government buildings, and the payback in money saved makes it essentially free because the Port Authority is providing the bonding for that. And it's a fabulous, it's a win-win for everybody. There's no downside to it. And it wouldn't happen through the city or the county, is the way I would say that.
I got two questions. One, could you give me, you said you have 18,000 employees at the Port Authority?
Jobs
generated.
Jobs generated.
Mm-hmm. Correct. That's the economic impact.
Over what period of time?
We measured it, I believe, we measured it based on 2011 tonnage. So we just take a snapshot in time. And
now that's not jobs just created at the Port Authority. That's with the financing that you do also.
No, that does not include the financing.
That does not include the financing. So do you measure, like Harriet was saying, the Emerald Cities?
Emerald Cities, right.
Yeah. Do you measure, because she brought up a sore point with me being Roos Brothers, and Roos Brothers getting money secondhand from you guys. Roos Brothers are not very diverse. They fought diversity every step of the way. And we know there are other companies. Can you say, if you want this money, then you will do this in terms of diversity? Do you do that? Can you do that?
Yeah.
We do that. We have a port inclusion policy that we monitor.
How does Roos Brothers get around it?
Well, you're focused on one name.
Oh, I just use that as
again, but I'm talking about construction. The construction industry in general, and this, if you read my column on Cool Cleveland, that's exactly, I used to be a pipe fitter as a young man. So I know the construction industry very, very well, and it's a fight that's been going on 40 years. The mayor just signed a benefits agreement. That's a good faith agreement. It put no markers, it didn't require any kind of reporting, it didn't, it's a trust us agreement.
Before though was the CBA development and discussion, all the debate going on around it. The Eaton firm was built and exceeded the numbers at the port's encouragement, and the other UH has done yeoman's work. I think for every example we might pick at, we might look at the broader picture of diversity and inclusion and how the port has pushed on that, how we've officially hired staff to push on that, to monitor, to measure, and to make a policy that requires that. And again, this is the new port, we're looking at. Well, Harriet's here, not to drop a bunch of endorsements, but it is important that the AFL-CIO has endorsed us, that the Cleveland Building Construction Stage just called with an endorsement. The mayors and managers this morning endorsed, and we hope Cool Cleveland will endorse on the value proposition of what this port does in its breadth, in jobs, in environmental stewardship, and yes, making place for somebody else to activate our waterfronts. We're very proud of the work we're doing these days. To Thomas's point, I think that's an issue, Thomas, perhaps to bring up to a body bigger than us. Perhaps it's the state of Ohio, because this is an issue across the state of Ohio, if it's an issue at all. But as Harriet said, people go to us because we're nimble, we're fast, we are accountable, and we meet publicly, on a monthly basis, and the public every month has ample opportunity to discuss concerns with us. And that's a picadillo for me. I want to be open, transparent, and absolutely accessible to this public.
And on that issue of accountability, this process is our accountability.
Right.
We have to come back to the voters every 5 years and ask you to say, please read. I mean, last year they said no, and so we had to go back and retool and come back and say, we need you to do this again. And that's just like the Metro Parks operates the same way, the Cleveland schools operate the same way. There's so many other governmental agencies that are appointed boards that manage large sums of public tax dollars.
And thank you for being here. Thank you for responding to our request to be here. And also, it's obviously a new port. It's obviously got new leadership and new voices, and that is very clear. I want to bring back to one of the issues you talked about, our ArcelorMittal cleaning up the Cuyahoga River, which everyone's for cleaning up the river. I mean, this is the backbone of our county, of our region. The question is, should the taxpayers be cleaning up a river that the richest man in India, probably the third richest man in the world, who threw a $20 million wedding for his daughter, owns the steel mill, that we are dredging, we are cleaning, we are spending taxpayer money just so they stay in town for how many few hundreds of jobs. I understand that someone has to clean that up, but is there a way that we can have the people that are benefiting from it the most, which is the steel company themselves, and they're doing very well. That's why they were here congratulating themselves on having such an efficient operation and making so much money that they can throw themselves these fabulous events. Why can't we push back on them to do their job and stop this slope from sliding into the Cuyahoga River?
If we open this up a little, we probably got just a variety of answers, but I think the core of this is the Cuyahoga River. This is the river that burned. This is the river that put us on the map as the poster city for why we should have water quality reform, and to some extent, the EPA. So we know we have a local stewardship responsibility. A number of things. One, the federal government has essentially left the building here. They have left responsibility to locals. I don't want to go back on last year with some of the larger visions for infrastructure that the port went out to ballot for. But reality is, we lost that one. We're moving on. We're back to basics plus. But while we lost that, in the year in between, the city applied to the federal government for Tiger funding for that bridge we put on last year's ballot, and they didn't get it. There is a message from Washington: you are on your own. So first of all, government to government, the port is taking on local responsibility when it sees the federal government is just not here. Second thing is, there are, on the Cuyahoga River, obviously a myriad of businesses beyond Arcelor being one of the biggest and probably the biggest on the river. But what I think, Thomas, we are doing is, look, we see what we see. We see an unkempt riverfront, and we are taking care of business. Not unlike the Ohio Canal Corridor, which you're very well familiar with, that does, on an annual basis, go out with river sweep and clean up, tonnage of tires and debris. We're both doing it. We're cleaning it up for the greater good. If we're going to invest, as we have as a community in the Flats East Bank, we want to see a good quality riverfront that's worth visiting. Having said all that, I think you've raised a bunch of great issues today. Personally, as somebody who runs an improvement district out in University Circle, I think the future is real estate holders contributing to the cleanup of a navigable waterway. That is something for the future. That's to talk to Councilman Simperman and Mayor Jackson about, others who obviously have that in their geopolitical domain. But the reality is real estate holders could pay in the future part of the share for the cleanup. And it depends on where you draw the line. We're just doing our part as a new steward in the Cuyahoga River and stepping up to the plate.
And I'd just like to add to that, even though this is very much tangential, but I just want to throw it in because that steel plant is near and dear to me, because for a couple reasons. Number one, that plant would not be there today but for Dennis Kucinich, actually, and the Steelworkers Union, basically. The workers and Dennis saved that plant. It was done. It was gone. And they luckily latched on to the Mott guy, who happens to be a progressive, and he reset that organization. Now, nobody is that crazy about the new CEO, you know, from the union perspective, but it is what it is. That's now the most productive rolled steel plant in the entire world. They've been hiring and hiring and hiring. These are good union jobs. Every job in that steel plant generates like 6 ripple effect jobs. In manufacturing generates more jobs than any other enterprise. You know, public service, whatever. It's manufacturing that generates all those ripple effect jobs. Right. And so it is something, and I totally agree with you. I think it's obscene that he threw it. I thought it was a $60 million wedding, but that's obscene. We can all agree that that's not good. And certainly from the union perspective, the people who, you know, go into that hot mill every day, it's not great that, you know. But, you know, they are good jobs. They do generate a lot of it's an important plant to keep here. And, you know, again, that debate is a long-standing, long-term debate that, you know, who pays? You know, the people who are obscenely rich, you know, using the, I mean, look all around. You see that happening all around this city. That's a bigger battle to fight. I know what side of that battle I'm on. And, but in this particular instance, that particular plant being so productive, it's such a feather in the cap for manufacturing in the United States, for unions, for community involvement in saving the place. You know, I'd hate to see, you know, that, you know, wealthy, I'm sure he could go anywhere at the drop of a hat, you know, because that's what they do, and they do that. So, you know, I guess that particular instance, there's a real community interest in keeping that plant here, despite the excesses of its, and you know,
I don't think so much
the national origin of its CEO.
But if you want, you know, we have to dredge the river, but we have to dredge the river from one company. His ships are the only one that's so heavy that they need the river.
No, they all need them. I mean, you know, they're responsible for their lucky.
Yeah, but nobody
the heavy one.
The heavy ones.
No, I mean, certainly if this was a shopping plaza there, the anchor tenant. But you know, in defense, which is, you know, dredging and disposal of dredging was 100% federally funded up until the 90s, and then that responsibility, there was a cost share push on the localities. The companies are paying what's called a harbor maintenance tax, which is supposed to go in and pay for dredging. Unlike the airport tax, this is used to balance the federal budget. So the federal government isn't spending what they're taking in on dredging. And so it becomes this, you know, they're frustrated with it, we're frustrated with it, but it's the new reality that this is just a federal responsibility that's been pushed down to us. But everybody who does use the river is paying in to a harbor maintenance tax that's supposed to go for local business.
While we're on that subject, have you decided what to do with those dredgings? Did you ever come up with a?
Yeah, there's a plan afoot as a part of the 5-year plan to reuse it in the community on, you know, construction, fill material. The stretch goal is to actually use it for beneficial reuse and the kinds of things you're interested in. Can we actually use it in gardening? In the end, it's clean.
I mean, when you dredge it, where do you take it now?
Dried out, but
it goes to out by Berkeley Front Airport. There's confined disposal.
That's where it is now. Yeah. But in the future.
Yeah, because that's filling up though, right?
Right, correct. But instead of building a 300-acre CDF that's hundreds of millions of dollars, now can we find a way to take existing material, move it out, and put
You're not going to build that big 75-foot mound that you were talking about.
The goal is to not do that. The reality is, if we don't change the way we've done business, we will have that. And so the strategic plan is stipulated that we look at the beneficial reuse opportunities, that we pull it out, we dry it on the docks and the southern ends of the docks, and we use it in the community.
I bet there's some really good, I mean, that could be really good stuff too. I'm a soil person, like you, Mansfield.
Yeah.
That could be some really good stuff.
So you're mentioning that the federal government is not paying for things like dredging that they used to pay for. This is a common theme we've been hearing all day with every of these levies, that the state generally or the federal government is cutting funding, and therefore we have to go to our local community time after time after time. And we're already paying taxes to the state, we're already paying taxes to the federal government. We're not getting our money back from that. And then the folks who are running these operations come to their local government or the local constituents and say we must pay. So I'll ask you the same question we've been asking everyone. If this doesn't pass, what do? How do you fill the gap? How do you get these things done? How do you keep the port running? If this doesn't pass like the last one didn't pass.
Issue 82 is vital for the competitiveness of the city and region, and we thank you guys for the opportunity to talk about it today. To Thomas's question, there will be a correlative hit to the operating budget. This is the end of our line relative to operating funds from this community. It is important to say that we are, for all the discussion we've had about all the variety of issues that the port engages in, this is core operating monies, that if we don't have it, 30% hit? It's a significant 35% hit into the budget, which has downstream effects on everything else. I mean, this is an effect on the longshoremen, this is an effect on you know, those who take materials off the docks, those who move materials from the docks, on the core operating purpose we were talking about. So we have an operating hit that will be extreme. And on many of the other initiatives, we're just trying to promote that this is a new port. Base plus, you know, back to basics on the renewal, but there is innovative thinking going on from everything from dredge to the use of the waterfront to the cleanup. And you know, you've probably heard it if you haven't already from the metro parks. Look, locally speaking, I think the upside benefit of having it pushed back upon us taxpayers is we do manage it better locally. We manage the river and the harbor front better. Frankly, the federal authorities, and I would say the Metro Park does it better than the state.
And just to, you know, to keep with that point though, too, for 45 years, it's been the same millage rate continually. No matter how many dollars have been taken away by the federal government or the state government, we've been operating on the same millage rate for some, and so we're asking for that same amount of money that you've been paying for 45 years with these issues that are here, and without saying we need more. We're just saying we can do this. We need what we have.
Now, let me ask you, also mentioned Metro Parks, and we just got done talking with them, and they have a lot of plans because they just have taken over a lot of the lakefront parks from the state. What kind of discussions are going on with the port, with those of you who are stewards of a lot of land that's been really locked up for industrial purposes and has not been available and accessible to the general public? You look at places like Chicago or Toronto that have great lakefronts and run ports and manage to do both all at once. And we've never had the will to push back and to limit where industry takes over the lakefront and where we allow access. What's the port's position on this?
You want to go on the staff side, the board side? I mean, it is collaboration, and we are neighbors on the waterfront with the State Lakefront Nature Preserve next to the new Metro Parks managed Gordon Park. The same thing on the west side with the Cleveland Bulk Terminal next to the new Metro Parks managed Whiskey Island. As neighbors go, we are all about the same thing. We are about a quality connected lakefront that is for sustainable purpose in this community, which means jobs, which means community, which means environment. So the port's involvement on the job supply chain in the River Valley, the port's involvement on the community side with the West Bank and the Irishtown Bend, and the port's involvement on the environmental stewardship. We work partner to partner, Brian Zimmerman and Will Friedman, working all the time. Add in the City of Cleveland and NEORSD. You know, we're all in that 9-mile Cleveland lakefront, and that goes beyond the 9 miles of Cleveland throughout Cuyahoga County, but the core activity you're talking about is right here at the center of the harbor front and the new Metro Parks lakefront. We're working together all the time. I mean, we've got issues with CSOs, with the sewer district. We've got opportunity to abate that problem. We've got opportunity in the long stretch future to possibly look at who should best manage the State Lakefront Nature Preserve. Maybe it's us transferring it to them, I don't know, but we'll talk about that down the line. Work with them all the time. And in addition to the public access points in the Cuyahoga River, and Will Friedman, our executive director, has done a nice job of involving himself in the Lake Links Trail. That's the idea of connecting Scranton Peninsula up to Whiskey Island, and we should be there as a partner. We can bring resources and knowledge to it.
So going back to the finance, so do you just, I mean, what's the strategic framework when you choose to finance a project or when you don't? And when I say this, it comes back to what you were talking about, building Walmarts and this kind of creative class consumption economy where you build an entertainment district and that's supposed to create the new internet, right? I mean, it doesn't happen. So is there a lens where, you know, you can either be a production economy or a consumption economy? And Cleveland should be a production economy. Do you use these kind of lens when you pick projects? Do you rank these projects?
Absolutely. I mean, we look at, first of all, what's its economic impact? You know, there are projects that are more impactful than others. Is it part of a cluster that is core to our region? You know, something like healthcare, where we've done a lot with the Cleveland Clinic and a lot of work out at UH and the University Circle area. Are there retail projects that we have supported? Yes, but we're not really supporting them. I mean, if University Heights chooses to create a TIF district for University Square, or Garfield Heights for City View, or on Superior Avenue by the Plain Dealer, and we're just the instrument to leverage those TIF dollars so there's money up front, we will do that, but we're not in that community advocating for that policy. We're going to let them do that policy. There are pure retail projects that we have turned down, that we have just said.
Do you do an analysis on what the negative externalities could be for that project and how that could affect the overall local economy?
Probably not to the extent. I think we're really looking at it, what types of jobs are being created. There has to be, you know, there usually needs to be some sort of office or some sort of, you know, at least some office element of the project, but a pure strip center in Strongsville is something that we've sort of looked and said, you know, maybe we've certainly done some things in the past that probably would be viewed differently. I mean, I think everybody's learned a lot of lessons. You know, retail's probably overbuilt, but we do look at each project just under the guise of economic development and what's its impact to the community.
And I think there is a lot of board discussion on this issue of where should we be and where shouldn't we be. And I think we're, again, Newport moving more in a new direction in the new economy. Things I've seen on the board in the last few months, we've seen UH's St. John West Shore, we've seen Magnificent High School, we've seen Constellation Schools, we've seen Nova. Those are across the geographic spectrum of Cuyahoga County. It's schools, it's hospitals, it's new employers, and I think we've been you know, very good with the use of the funds and changing people's lives.
We have just a couple more minutes.
Why do you think you were turned down last time?
Okay, Mansfield, I think to John's point, we're back to basics here. We are just asking for a renewal of what you've been paying for. We took a stretch goal last time, and in so doing, I think I'm going to be one board member who's going to say, we're not apologetic about what we went after, given what we could have brought and what was lost. And I use the bridge as an example. We don't have it today, but we have a new convention facility, we still have no bridge. We're not apologetic about what we went out for. What we are is, we are in our assessment of the voter appetite, humble. We know when we ask people to pull money out of their pocket, we have to put it to good use. We respectfully ask for your endorsement and that of Cuyahoga County. Why we think we lost? Perhaps it was too much. Simply, and when voters looked at it, it was a jump. Was there a value proposition associated with it? Absolutely. We are back to basics. We're also framing for you how we work on a basic strategy, but we do a lot of other things. It's a good value. It's the lowest of all levy initiatives. They're all important, in my opinion, but this is the lowest on the actual what comes out of your pocket. It's what you've been paying. So turning why we lost into how we hope we win, we hope you'll realize that we contribute substantially to the competitiveness of this region. Somebody said to me the other day that we actually are the only governmental economic development entity that is expressly for the purpose of economic development in Cuyahoga County. There are a lot who work on it, very important institutions, but we're the only one who does this directly, expressly for economic development. So if you want to keep the economy growing, vote for issue 82.
And I can tell you, Mansfield, that, you know, from a campaign perspective, we didn't tell the story last time. We didn't effectively tell the story last time. And that's something that our campaign has spent a lot of time and a lot of person hours going out and talking about to community organizations across the county of every kind to say, this is what we do, this is who we are, answering these tough questions and taking the criticisms, but also providing the response that we do good work and it needs to continue and giving a basis for that. So we're telling the story a lot better this time than we did last time. I think last time I wasn't on the campaign team, but perhaps it might have even been taken for granted that the voters would just go for it. We need to be a little more respectful of the voters' will, and this is why we're doing what we're doing
this conversation alone, that camera is helpful to us. Thank you.
It is helpful.
And speaking of you know, the future and how we're going forward, and also to your issue, Richey, I think one thing we have to keep in mind is, I think probably everybody in this room would agree that the lake is undervalued, always has been undervalued in this community. It's our best, most well-kept secret, and it's precious and it's a treasure. We haven't ever utilized it historically as much and as well and with as much stewardship as we should have. And I think the port, you know, it's sort of like the symbol of the key to our future, a future that is both focused on manufacturing, because that's what we are, that's what we do. We make things here, and we want to continue to make things, but also in a way that provides good stewardship for the planet. Transportation by water is by far the best type of thing for the environment. It is critically important, and if we can get more container ships in here and really start importing and exporting goods from the heartland, you know, in from the world and out to the world, we can do it in an environmentally responsible way. We can do it in a way that integrates both the entertainment purposes of the entertainment potential of the lake, like they do in Chicago, as well as a good industrial economic purpose. It would be a great marriage, and it's a great vision for this city to focus on. You know, I think the future of the city is in that lake. And it can't just be recreational, it can't just be industrial, and I think, you know, the type of leadership we've seen from the port recently, combined with, you know, a really, you know, an involved population that says we want a lake that we are integrated with, not that, you know, not that there's a barrier, you know, road barriers or whatever, and so I think we've got a great. This is very important. It's future. You know, we need to look to the future. And this kind of thing, the way that even losing last time, making people go back to the drawing board and rethink things and focus, it could be a plus for the long-term future of our city.
Thank you so much, and thank you really for bringing everyone, Harriet and John and Chris and Brent. Thank you so much for taking time to be here. We really sincerely appreciate it. I think it's been a very good discussion. This did go longer than we expected. Fortunately, we had a little. We're going to cut into our lunchtime, guys. That's just the way it goes. But it's well worth it. This is a fabulous discussion. We're so appreciative that you bring the honesty and the expertise to the table here. And thank you for making time for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.